Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam Golov, Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Today we are thrilled to introduce Ashita Grover of Cisco Systems. Without further ado, welcome Ashita.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for the opportunity for presenting via DCL. In today's session, I would like to discuss the connection between product strategy and content strategy and how this can lead to generating revenue. And I'll touch on a few tools, a few options that are available today in the market to track metrics and drive this to a more tangible goal. With that, let's dive into what product strategy is. Product strategy is basically forms the foundation of the product life cycle. It gives you a roadmap and an execution plan in terms of how the product's going to be developed, how it's going to be marketed, and how it's going to be adopted across the market, across the install base, across the various audiences. We also zero in on specific target audiences and also try to understand consumer attributes, and all of these form the various components of product strategy. If I was to paint a clear picture or draw a picture in terms of what product strategy is, it makes 4 parts of a pie: market research, target market, understanding the competitive analysis, understanding the competitive landscape of the market, and the positioning of the product overall. Target market is typically based off of persona analysis, which we are very familiar with as content professionals. We focus in on user experience in terms of what are the various aspects of user experience that need to be honed in, and what's the customer journey that we anticipate our audiences going through. Positioning is dictated by budget and metrics in terms of how many resources or how much resources a company or an organization is willing to devote to a product, and what are the success metrics that are going to drive or push this product forward. When we look at this, the description of the components here, what this shows us is that product strategy, or the various aspects or the various pillars of product strategy, focus in on what the user is, what the audience is, who the consumer is going to be for a specific product, for a specific service, and that's the main idea behind creating a product strategy, is to understand your customer base, who's going to use it, how they're going to use it, and what are they going to use it for. Product strategy tied in with content strategy leads us in one direction, which is understanding the user, understanding the audience. So the one common goal of both these components, product strategy and content strategy, is to understand and deliver to the key audiences, the key users that we are targeting for this product. When we create content, identification of the consumers is key. One of the things that we learn very early on as content professionals is know your audience, know who you're writing for, understand what their needs are, anticipate what their needs might be. So the one thing that this is one thing that I have realized over and over again when working with product strategy is that product strategy also tries to hone in on who the consumer is, who's the audience, and what is it that this is targeted for. Identifying the consumer is critical, just like it is critical for content strategy. Parts of identifying the consumer are persona analysis, user experience, and customer journey. Let me get into this a little bit more to understand the depth of these three concepts. Persona analysis actually drives us to understanding the key segments of the product's consumers. It provides insight into what the user's motivations and pain points might be, how we can address some of those motivations, how can we address some of those key challenges that the users might be facing when we're positioning a product, when we're trying to come up with a product. And content and personas are often aligned with the stages of the buying cycle because that helps us understand what kind of content, what kind of help, what kind of support a user is going to need depending on how new their adoption is of a specific product or how mature, how long they've been using it. User experience covers a broad spectrum with regards to the user's involvement with the product. We get into user interface design. Is the product geared towards a student? Is it geared towards a professional? Is it geared towards a stay-at-home parent? What is the support staff that's going to be needed when the product is rolled out, when the product is sold in the market, once we start targeting key customer audiences? And what is the increase in terms of the product scope that we are looking ahead at? When it comes to customer journey, it's important to understand that it is really about mapping a customer's experience, the actions that they've taken to reach a certain stage, and the actions they take when they're at a certain stage, and how do they move from one point to another in terms of usage of the product, in terms of life of the product, in terms of experience with the product. It is also important to understand why they want to invest in a certain product or a certain service. Is it a one-time only investment, or are they looking to keep coming back to the product? What is the motivation, and how do you lessen their engagement with the product or with the service? One of the things that we've noticed over the past few years is more and more businesses are going into the subscription-based model instead of a one-time buy. And why is that? I think that is something that's interesting to think about, is because engaging a customer for a one-time buy versus selling a subscription obviously creates consistent monetary flow into a business. And versus, hey, you buy a product, it's a one-time thing, you pay the check and you move forward. But when it's a subscription-based option, or when there's a subscription associated with a product or with a service, you automatically see consistent monetary flow into your business. So that's another aspect that is driven by motivation towards using a certain product or a service, and how does a business make sure that there is consistent monetary flow to support the product and to help it grow for future needs. It's important to ask questions about what might be the challenges around the customer journey. What are some of the uncertainties that they are dealing with? What are the uncertainties that are inherent with the product or with the service? Any other issues that might be preventing a customer or a user from moving from one stage to another? Some of the barriers that come into play could be structural. a difficult process to follow. Sometimes the product is just too difficult to use. Sometimes the product is too early in the market and the product and the audience has not matured to actually use that product or to understand the concept behind that product. Some of these, so it's important to understand the various barriers that might have a role to play in customer journey. And then comes the aspect about content strategy. Content strategy and product strategy have a very key connection. And many a times I've been asked this question is, why is it that content strategy is closer to product strategy than anything else? For example, support strategy or sales strategy, or for that matter, even development strategy. The interesting thing is that content has to be made available to the customer, to the user, before the product hits the market, when the product hits the market, and when the product is taken off the shelf. So irrespective of what stage the product is at, the relevant content has to be made available to the users, to the customers, to the customer base on an ongoing basis. Content is the one tangible which actually conveys the story of the product, a story that crosses phases, that creates the bridge between a customer and the product. So with that, I get into more specifics about what is content strategy when associated with a product or a service. Content strategy refers to the planning, development, and management of content, whether it's written or in any other media. This is a definition that I've picked up from Wikipedia, and I think this summarizes exactly what content strategy is about. Of course, there are many other aspects of content strategy that have to be considered and which are more around the overall layout, the mechanics of content, for example, metadata and taxonomy. We get into some of those a little bit later. Product strategy components and how they contribute to content strategy. For example, product roadmaps will tell you the product direction and hence the kind of content you should be writing for when describing the product direction. Industry trends, industry shifts, how is the market shaping up? How do you convey this to your user? You have to create content that supports some of these arguments. What's the market share of the product that you're trying to sell? What's the market share of your company that and via which you're trying to sell the product? This is where branding comes into play, and it has a huge role to play because you might end up buying a product because it's a brand name versus buying something which is a little bit cheaper, just because you don't know about that company and you're not familiar with that brand. Competitors. It's very important to keep an eye on how your competitors are dealing with content for a competing product. Are you doing exactly what they're doing, or are you doing it even better than what they're doing? Keeping a close eye on what the customer asks are with regards to content. I often refer back to this example of, when I first started working at Cisco, no one even thought about mobile content, but around 2012, 2013, I remember clearly looking into these options because that's when the mobile web was picking up. Age of the product is something I speak about quite a few times in this presentation, and that is, it's important to understand that when the content needs for a new product are very different as compared to content needs for a mature product. And if you think about it, when you first roll out a brand new product or a service, content is what's going to tell the user, is going to convey to the customer that this is what this product or the service or this technology is about. Once the product has had its life in the market, once it's been around for a few years, once it's been adopted fairly well, at that point in time, the content needs are going to be a little bit different. And that also takes us to the point where the product starts to include more and more options, more and more advanced features. So it's a cyclical situation, a process by means of which, as the product matures, the customer base or the install base grows as well, matures as well. When it comes to some more components with regard of content strategy include understanding of the product. It's important for a writer, for a content professional to know what they're writing about. So learning the product, becoming the subject matter expert on a certain topic, on a certain product, on a certain technology is critical. Understanding the product life cycle, which is then going to it's going to relate to the content life cycle. It's going to create the content life cycle, which is they're interdependent. The product strategy and content strategy of a new technology versus a mature technology. So, like I said, the age of the product, the age of the service, age of how long it's been around, it has a key role to play when you're creating content for this product. Another aspect to be kept in mind when creating a content strategy is how do you deliver content as a business asset more than, hey, it's just another white paper, or hey, this is just another configuration guide. It's important to understand and share and socialize a content plan. A content plan includes user content, how it's going to be conveyed, how is it going to be socialized. What's your social media strategy? How many people are you actually going to reach out to if you just post the content to your company website? In today's day and age, people will more often than not look at social media sites to research your product, to research your service, instead of going to your home webpage or your website to understand the offerings. It's important to understand the key stakeholders, because these are the folks who you're going to rely on for sanity checks to make sure that the content you're delivering out to the users is valuable content, it's relevant, and it's technically accurate. Understanding milestones and deadlines. There is content loses its value if it's not delivered when required for a specific product or for a service. Oftentimes, for example, at Cisco, we have to release our release notes the day the product image is posted to our corporate site. The reason being that there are users and customers who download the image almost right away, and the first thing that they're going to read through or need to know is what's the information available in the release notes, because the release notes are going to convey the new features. They're going to talk about some of the limitations, some of the caveats that the user has to be aware of even before they start installing the product. Tools availability is another critical aspect, because you might have a great idea of creating a special feature on your website, but if your infrastructure or your tools that you're using don't actually enable that, there is a challenge. And again, stressing on the availability of the content. It's more about, one of the terms that's widely used these days is omni-channel. How do you make sure that your content is made available through different channels, to different people, to different populations, to different geographies? Content audit is another key aspect, because just creating or just posting content to a website and saying, hey, it's all there, is one aspect of content availability. But keeping that content relevant, healthy, and applicable is even more important, because it's important for your users, your customers, to come to your website and get the answers that they're looking for, to come to your portal, to come to your knowledge base and get the answers that they're looking for. So it's best practice. These are guidelines that we've had to follow. We should be following when it comes to managing a maintenance cycle for content. There's inventory, so it's always a good idea to have a sense of how much content you have out there. Keep an eye on how much content is being created, how much content is being removed, how much content is still relevant overall. Doing a content audit is another great best practice because it helps you keep a close eye in terms of how you can categorize your content into various action modes. For example, maintenance. What kind of content needs maintenance? Where it should be kept as is because it is still relevant. What about rewrite? Maybe there is certain content that you posted maybe 6 months ago now needs a little bit of a rewrite so that it is up to date. Archival and removal. What about content that was posted 10 years ago or 5 years ago, which is really not relevant anymore and it's old and does not serve the customer's needs and it's just occupying space on your portal. Merging content. Some content may be old but is still relevant and can be added to existing content. Gap analysis is an interesting topic for me because while it has its own place on my list, at the same time it touches on the other components that I just talked about with regards to content audit. When I talk about gap analysis, I am referring to you have a certain piece of content maybe colored yellow and you've created another piece of content maybe colored green. But in between the green and yellow, there was a certain piece of content that needs to be there and doesn't quite fit in the yellow category or the green category. This may be completely new content. This may be a shade different from the existing content, but this is content that's missing. So to bring this back into more realistic terminology, let's say we created installation content and we created configuring content. But in between these two, we did not really talk about the limitations of maybe an installation feature or maybe a limitation that was related to a limitation related to a configuring a feature. So this is where gap analysis comes into play, and someone's going to catch that and say, hey, you probably need to add this either to the existing content or create a new chapter or a new document or a new chunk of content that's going to convey this exact piece of information. Always try to build consensus and buy-in before you move forward with the actions related to a content audit. No one likes surprises. There could be a few people who have bookmarked your pages who suddenly go to your and find what they were looking for. So it's important for you to make sure that your key stakeholders are aware about the changes that you're making to your content when it comes to a content audit. Like I had said, there are many aspects to a content audit, and we can get into more details about information architecture. There's how do you use, who are the subject matter experts that you should be talking to, what are the metrics that you should be collecting. Style consistency, is it important, is it not important? I personally think it is important because it makes your customers have to have a certain level of predictability in terms of what to expect. So the text that's used or the media that you're using to share the content needs to be, there has to be consistent strategy around that. Alignment with business processes is when you're a company the size of Cisco, you have to adhere to compliance guidelines and certifications. So especially when it comes to hardware, when it's sold across geographies. All of these things are major components that make up a content audit. The consumer, or the end user as I call it, then like I said at the start of my presentation, the reason why I hone in on product strategy and content strategy is because both of them have one common goal, and that is addressing the needs of the user, addressing the needs of your end user. When we talk about consumers, there are two broad categories that I look at when I'm addressing a consumer base or when I'm trying to understand my audience. There is business to business and there is business to customer. Business to business is more for companies that are creating large products. Like, again, I'll go back to using the example that I'm most familiar with, which is Cisco. We create networking devices for large companies, for enterprises, for data centers, for service providers. So the buying decisions, the decision making aspects, the various reasons why a customer will go in the direction are different versus business to customer. Business to customer is maybe a company like Apple, for example, the iPhone, the iTouch. These are more small businesses, homes, students, where your audience base is really the end user, someone who's in 5th grade or someone who's just starting out college, versus a company like Cisco is going to have a customer base which is where their expertise level is a little bit more predictable. So with that, I like to go into specific differences, like I've highlighted here in the 2-column setup, and the differences between business to business versus business to customer. The first thing that comes to mind is when it comes to a business to business audience, you have, as a content provider, I have a little bit better handle over the expertise of my audience. On the contrary, when you address a business to customer content need, it is difficult to define a benchmark for expertise. In a business to business setup, there are structured buying methodologies. They have to go by a fiscal year. They have to go by a certain budget that was allocated to their department when they want to invest in equipment or invest in a service. On the contrary, when it comes to business to customer, buying is more dependent on a life event. For example, I often use this example is that I did not invest in a cell phone until the day my son started going to daycare. So at that time, I realized I needed to be in the know. I needed to be plugged in. I needed to be available if someone wanted to reach out to me. And having a child in daycare prompted me to buy a cell phone. The other difference that comes to mind is in a business to business, business needs or organization needs are going to drive the rate of adoption. It's going to be more about, all right, now suddenly our organization has grown from 50 to 100 people, and we need an IT department with an infrastructure that can scale across that large user base. And that's when they will invest in a new product and they will adopt a new product. Whereas on in the business to consumer situation, it's more about a personal need that's going to drive the rate of adoption. I don't have time over the weekend to go to Costco and to Target and to get my groceries from 3 different places. So I'm going to use a service that's going to help me do that. So that's a personal need that drives the adoption of a service like Amazon Fresh or several of these services that are now becoming more and more available to us. Business to business, there is a lower need for customized content because, like I said, you have a better handle over their background and expertise. On the contrary, for business to consumer or business to customer, it's more about customized content because there is little to no predictability in terms of what their expertise level is. Hence, that leads to the question of content reuse. There's obviously a higher potential for reusing content when there is lesser need or lower need for customized content, whereas in business to customer, there's a lower potential. In business to business and business to customer, the one common need always has been a high impact of user experience and customer satisfaction. This is one common theme that you will notice whether you're writing for a product, for a service, whether you're writing for a business-to-business customer or, business-to-business model or a business-to-customer model. Either way, there is a high impact of user experience and customer satisfaction when it comes to the success of your product or success of your content for that matter. Customization is what I've been talking about quite a bit, and this is actually a snapshot of a Starbucks barista. And the reason why I picked this specific picture was I've been very impressed with the way Starbucks' mobile app works, and the level the level of detail that you can dictate as a user in terms of what you want in your drink or your snack, it's impeccable. They've put a lot of thought into it, and it's amazing. You walk in and you've placed your order and your drink is ready. You don't have to stand in line, any of that sort. It's really great. So customization is something that, content or the ability to customize our content is something I still find it a challenge. It's still challenging for us to customize content to the level I think our customers want customized content. With that, I will talk a little bit about generating revenue. How can content strategy help businesses generate revenue based off of the product strategy? A happy customer is obviously going to lead to more revenue. So the question really is, when it comes to satisfaction, are the customer expectations being met? How do you distinguish between a customer's expectations versus their perception? It's important to understand that a customer might have different expectations versus the perception they have about a product or about what they expect might be completely different. How likely are they to recommend a certain product or a service to their friends and family? It takes, oftentimes they say in management, after giving 7 compliments, you can then provide a piece of negative feedback. If I was to use the same metric for satisfy when a customer's number of times a customer has walked away feeling satisfied versus feeling dissatisfied, I think if we still use the same ratio, it's a 7 to 1. If a customer walks away happy and satisfied 7 times, then and you have even one situation where they walked away dissatisfied, there's a good chance that you're going to hear about it. And not only there's a chance they don't come back, they might even go out on social media and actually criticize the product. So it's important to understand that emotions do play a big role in customer satisfaction. How many times are they going to come back and repeat purchase? Like, will they come back and use your product again? Will they come back and buy your product again? If you look at the cell phone industry, it's interesting. It's almost like a religion. Once an iPhone user, always an iPhone user, or once an Android user, always an Android user. It's interesting because I've been using an iPhone ever since it was launched, and I don't want to change it. Why is that? Because 1, I'm happy with it. 2, yes, it's got its problems, but I've figured out a way how to use it and how to solve my issues, which tells me that I'm okay making a compromise because my overall satisfaction is pretty high. So those are some of the key aspects that are going to bring your customers back when it comes to when they talk about repeat purchase intention. So, like I said, overall satisfaction is going to bring in the ongoing revenue that all businesses want. Content strategy is effective when there is a solid content marketing strategy associated with it. A few years ago, I realized that marketing content uses specific content management tools which are completely different from what tech comms or traditional tech comms teams use in terms of content marketing tools. I'm sorry, content management tools. The interesting thing is that the metrics that define success for content marketing are the same metrics that tech comms content or end user content could use. And those metrics are usually inbuilt in the content management tools used by marketing versus the content management tools that are used by tech comms. Content marketing is really not, is a goal that all content should have in terms of, how that can lead to revenue. There are different schools of thought around this. There are different ideologies behind this, but my belief is that any kind of content generated can lead to bringing in revenue. It boils down to how valuable your content is. Is it relevant? Is it consistent? And is it being shared across different portals? Is it being made available to social media, and is it really reaching your users or not? That's the whole idea behind content marketing. The KPIs around content marketing revolve around page hits, dwell time, how long did your user come and stay on your page versus they came, they looked for 3 seconds, couldn't find what they wanted, and they moved on. How many inbound links are leading your users to your content? How many social media shares? And are you actually influencing decision makers? I think these are some of the key aspects of content marketing. If you're able to hit some of these KPIs, I think you would really be in a good place in terms of figuring out actual revenue coming in through the content that you're creating. There are some tools out of these 4 that I have used, and they are, Cisco has used Clarabridge. I have read quite a bit about Crimson Hexagon, and I think DCL also does addresses certain aspects of collecting with regards to metrics, with regards to analytics. And I think it's important for all of us in the business of content to understand how the effort that we put into creating content can actually lead to bringing in revenue. With that, that was my last slide. Adam, over to you.
Well, thank you, Ashita. A very informative webinar indeed. We have several questions that have been submitted. The first being, on the content slide was the phrase style consistency. Can you elaborate what this means with a few examples, please?
The style consistency with regards to one of the challenges that we face as a big company in Cisco is consistency in terms of terminology. There are people, given that content for the same product is written by different functions, people have their own way of describing or even naming certain features. For example, marketing calls a certain feature by one name, engineering calls it something completely different. And depending on who's actually writing the content that's going to be shared with the end user, it's anyone's guess what actual terminology your end user is going to get exposed to. So as a content team or as a content professional in a company, in an organization, my suggestion has always been that you should make sure that your key stakeholders are aware of the terminology usage in the content that's being exposed to the user. Because lack of not paying attention to that is going to bring in confusion and often leads to support cases, because a user might be reading a certain piece of content that refers to an engineering string or an engineering feature name versus the same person reading a data sheet or some marketing collateral written by someone from marketing. They might be reading about the same feature, but it's written differently. It's referring to two different things according to them. So that's why I speak about consistency and style consistency. That's one in terms of terminology usage. The other aspect with regards to consistency is making sure metadata and keywords match in terms of what your search engine is going to be searching for versus what you're putting in your content. So it's important to talk to the person who's creating the SEO guidelines. It's important for you to know what the SEO guidelines are so that you are able to deliver a consistent search experience to the user.
Great, thank you, Ishita. The next question has come in is, you've mentioned sites that allow you to get KPIs on certain types of content. In your experience, who do you share this data with to reinforce the correctness and need for your content strategy? Also, do you find that you need to process this data before sharing, or is it capable of telling the story on its own?
So when you collect, for example, a tool like Clarabridge will typically search through the content. It conducts a string level search depending on the rules and the rules that you set, and it scrolls through tons of data to find certain information. The content that we collect based off of that is usually not readable by most people, so we typically have one or two folks from my team who will analyze that information and collect numbers around that, and in terms of positive feedback, negative feedback, dwell time. These are very specific numbers that we are able to decipher from the data that we collect. So once we have that information, then I typically take that to my management and to people who are involved in keeping the content on our website current and relevant, and share this with them. Once that communication has happened, that's when we come back with action plans in terms of, hey, we got this release out on this day, and these certain word strings did not match. We need to go back and make that correction. So this is an ongoing process. It's not like something you do one time and then you forget about it. This is an ongoing process. So we have quarterly meetings where we are discussing these improvements as part of a content audit, and that's how these are factored in and actually made actionable for the writers and other folks in the organization who create content.
Excellent. Thank you, Ishita. The next question has come in is, can you describe the engagement process between you and your internal teams when it comes to aligning content and product strategies?
Okay, this is actually pretty intense. We have weekly meetings with our marketing people, especially the product managers, so that we are in touch in terms of which customers they are targeting. So Adam, for example, the product line that we work for, that my team and I work for, started out in the data center space. Over the past year or so, we've moved into the enterprise space, and we are looking at healthcare, we are looking at service providers. So the content needs by vertical are very different, and that's why being in close touch or being in communication with marketing is even more important, because we have to know what are the specific customer needs by vertical. And I'm sure those of you who have ever worked for an AT&T or a Verizon know that service provider content needs are very, very specific, and they're actually quite rigid when it comes to what is it that they're asking for. And this kind of leads me to where we feel that we can't customize our content to the extent we need to, because our there are tools limitations that won't let us do that. But to your question, yes, we have ongoing discussions with marketing, with development, so that we are on point with regards to where the product is in the development stage, as well as in terms of who this product is being marketed to.
Excellent, thank you. The next question that's come in is, are you directly involved in developing paid-for content to generate revenue? If so, do you use an established pricing model? And if so, can you elaborate on it?
So when it comes to generating, creating content that is being paid for, that usually is a very specific ask that comes from a customer, and yes, they do pay for the extra content that they are asking for, or the specific content that they're asking for. So for example, we create, because that is, so let me also clarify, when the customer pays, they are not paying just for the content. They're paying it is part of what they're paying for the product, which is being customized for them. So there will be a customer A for whom Cisco will create a special image or a special product, and that is part of the business agreement, is that whatever resources Cisco as a company is deploying for that product are being paid for by that specific customer. So to your question, no, there isn't a specific payment for just because we created a special doc or a special piece of content for them, but it's packaged with the product payment that they're actually going in the buying of the whole product overall. So content there has the role to play of a business asset.
Excellent. Thank you, Ishita. The last question that's come in is, when it comes to customer engagement and experience, can you describe your process?
Cisco has several avenues where we have an opportunity to talk to customers, to hear their opinions, to collect feedback, and we have one-on-one situations where there's an on-site visit where a customer is coming in, and because I'm part of a marketing team, I have the opportunity to sit in discussions to learn from these discussions in terms of what their challenges are and how I can help the customer by providing a specific piece of content which was probably missing when we first published the content. And so yes, I do get an opportunity to interface with customers directly. And again, this isn't a one-time thing. This is pretty much on an ongoing basis. We have customer meetings pretty much every quarter where you have the opportunity to learn what their challenges are, and then we go back, we create an action plan in terms of how we can address those issues and those challenges and help our customers. So that could very well be a certain new content that we need to create, or a certain new configuration in the product. It's usually a combination of many of these improvements that we are making on an ongoing basis based on customer feedback.
Well, excellent, Sheeta, and thank you for this wonderful webinar, and thank you everyone for attending. This will conclude today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the webinar archive section of our website, located at www.dclab.com. Also, our next webinar will be this Thursday, May 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, titled Powering Content in the Publishing and Media Industries. The panel presentation that will include Mandy May, Digital Publishing Manager at SAE International, Matt Turner, Chief Technology Officer for Media and Entertainment, MarkLogic, and Mark Rose, President of DCL. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.